There is always a certain amount of risk when driving off-road, but by far the greatest is the side slope. It is best to try and avoid these obstacles and select an alternative route if possible. However, if you are driving along a side slope, be sure not to lift a high-sided wheel over a rock or root which could easily either send you off course or, worse still, tip the vehicle over. If at any time you feel uneasy, simply steer down the hill. When traversing a hill like this at an angle, always ensure that any load inside the vehicle is low down and well secured. As always, ensure you know where your front wheels are pointing. More often than not, people inadvertently steer uphill. Don't let this happen to you, or you could end up in a worse predicament, broadside on the hill. If you're uncertain where your front wheels are facing, ask your passenger on the top side to look out and advise. Here, David does it wrong for the camera by steering uphill. At any time, the tyres could find traction and pull the vehicle out of the track and across the slope. A rollover is quite likely to follow. Don't try crossing a ditch squarely like this, because you're unlikely to get very far. Once you've buried the bumper in the other side, you'll probably need to be recovered. Drive up to the ditch, having already inspected it, at an angle of about 45 degrees to ensure that only one wheel at a time drops in. The idea is to have 3 wheels on the top, either pulling or pushing you across. Use first or second gear with diff lock engaged. When crossing ridges and any other obstacles off-road, it's important to know your approach angle. That is, the angle from the front of the tyres to the front of the bumper, spoiler or low-mounted fog lights. You must also know your departure angle, which is the same imaginary line but to the rear. It's usually the tow hook that reduces this. It is also important to know the ramp breakover angle of the vehicle, which is the angle between the front and rear wheels where the chassis fouls the ground. Notice too how close the front mud flap is to being ripped off by the front wheel. If ridges are crossed obliquely, the breakover angle is improved and the chassis should not ground out. When driving a gully like this, be sure to walk the route first, as there's unlikely to be much tyre in contact with the walls of the gully. Make sure too that you keep the vehicle level to ensure that it does not slip down on one side. If in doubt, have someone in front beckon you through. Always drive as slowly as you can in a low gear. See how close the door mirror and radio aerial are to being caught up in the hedge. Should you be crossing a gully like this, make sure that you have sufficient approach speed and have selected the right gear to take you down, across and up the other side in one continuous action. This is also an appropriate time to remind you that the centre diff lock should be engaged at all times when driving off-road. Using third gear, David drives down, across and powers up the other side with a minimal amount of wheel spin. Notice too how he works the steering wheel from side to side to help the front wheels find extra traction. Before crossing what could be deep water, be sure to get out of the vehicle and check the depth with a stick. This cannot be stressed enough, as crossing water that is simply too deep for the vehicle can cause many problems. In the case of all Land Rover products, the maximum wading depth is about 20 inches. If you're crossing a pond, drive in as slowly as possible using first gear and picking the most gradual route down to save creating a large splash. Then change into second gear, keeping a steady, slow speed through the water and up the other side. If you become stuck in mud or silt, make sure you keep the engine running to stop water from entering the exhaust. There is a great attraction in driving through mud and water, and it can be great fun. But remember, off-road vehicles detest it, for the mud and water destroy bushes, oil seals, bearings and brakes. Always drive sensibly at a steady speed. Here, David shows how not to do it. It is much better to drive slowly and under control, like this. Should water kill the ignition, be sure to restart the engine quickly. If it doesn't start, try and wind the vehicle out of the water on the starter motor in first gear. When driving through deep water, try and push a bow wave ahead of the bumper to create a depression under the engine bay. As you drive out of the water, don't forget to left foot brake to dry the brakes out. Remember to disengage the centre diff lock if fitted to prevent transmission wind-up before driving back onto a hard surface. Before you return to the tarmac, always clean and check over the vehicle. Whenever possible, use a power washer and pay particular attention to the vehicle's windscreen, radiator core, disc brakes, lights and number plates. Also, clean the mud off the tyres and wheel rims. Finally, have a good look over the vehicle, checking that all lights are in working order before inspecting fluid levels under the bonnet. Don't forget to remove the wading plugs fitted earlier and see that everything underneath is as it should be. This video set out to provide an introduction to the basics of off-road driving techniques. However, nothing beats experience, and it's strongly recommended that you take a day of hands-on training at one of the country's established and reputable off-road training centres